Welcome back to another episode of Archie Sonic Character Files as we explore the histories of the inhabitants on planet Mobius. In this episode, we take a look at the history of the Pronghorn sisters known as Clove and Cassia. Much like Relic the Pika, these are another group of characters from the new timeline that I really wanted to talk about for this series. And I hope you got some tissues ready because this is not going to be a happy one. They made their first appearance in issue 263 in the story Consequences. We see that Clove and Cassia are members of Robotnik's Egg Army, and being one of the many Egg Bosses. Clove is normally the leader, while her younger sister Cassia is second in command and has gone through a lot of cybernetic upgrades and treatments thanks to Robotnik's cyberization process. They inspect the damage in one of Robotnik's bases that was left behind by Sally, Tails, and Antoine. After looking at the security footage, they discover that a Chaos Emerald was taken and reported to Dr. Robotnik. The Pronghorn sisters would later have their spotlight moment in the three-part story Hidden Costs. They, along with their squad, are assigned to look over the Stone Stormland zone. When receiving a signal that someone has showed up in the zone, Clove decides to investigate. Cassia wants to join in as well, but Clove rejects her offer, saying that violence isn't necessary. Even so, Cassia decides to investigate for herself without Clove knowing. She comes across Bunny Rabot, and the two of them begin to fight, especially when a Chaos Emerald hangs in the balance. Cassia teases Bunny for being half roboticized, in which the rabbit yells at her that being half roboticized wasn't something that she wanted. Meanwhile, Clove finds Sally Acorn snooping around and tries to reason with her not to fight. Here we see that Clove isn't so much of a bad guy, where despite working for Robotnik, she doesn't want her people to deal with being involved with Robotnik's never-ending feuding with the Freedom Fighters. After explaining her point of view, Sally agrees not to fight her, and Clove has no plans of reporting this meetup to Robotnik. Sally tries to offer some help for Clove, but she states that having her people not involved in battles is all the help she could ask for. Back with Cassia and Bunny, they stumble into an underground tunnel during their battle. Cassia ends up with a bruised knee, and Bunny mocks her about getting a selfish upgrade from Robotnik. Cassia lashes back at Bunny, saying that her cybernetic state is because of her illness, and that the parts were helping her feel better. Bunny apologizes, and the two gals settle on a truce in order to find a way to escape the tunnels. They begin to understand each other's personal struggles, until Clove and Cassia's soldiers show up. Cassia decides to let Bunny go free, in exchange that she gets to keep the Chaos Emerald, but Bunny doesn't agree to this and proceeds to snatch the emerald and fly away. One of the soldiers tries to shoot her down, but Cassia stops him from firing. When asked about why she did that, Cassia simply states that Robotnik doesn't know that there was a Chaos Emerald here, so they all agree to not say anything about this to the big boss. She is soon reunited with Clove, but she suddenly feels ill and faints, leaving Clove and the soldiers to carry her back to the base. Clove contacts Robotnik of what happened to Cassia and questioning why this happened after he said that she would be fine after adapting to the cybernetics. Well, it turns out Robotnik lied about the whole thing. He reveals to her that he didn't fully cure Cassia of her disease, as he has no idea what it is. The cybernetics are nothing more but to keep her on life support. When Clove asks why he didn't just tell her the truth, he simply states that he'd like to make a game out of the situation. He didn't care about Cassia or her people, all he wanted to see was Clove's loyalty to Robotnik's Egg Army. But he reassures her that Cassia will continue receiving her cybernetic treatments to stay alive, as long as she continues to serve him. At the recovery bay, Clove visits Cassia, who is recovering. She hopes that after the treatment, they can finally escape Robotnik and leave the Eggman Empire behind. Clove couldn't bear to reveal the truth about her situation, and instead promises that they'll one day be free from Robotnik's grasp. Clove would be seen again in the Sonic Universe story Eggman's Dozen. The Nagas twins have taken over one of Robotnik's facilities, and so the Mad Doctor summons all of his Egg Bosses to instruct them on how to reclaim it. Clove is paired up with Thunderbolt the Chinchilla to find and shut down the base's defense systems. While on their mission, Thunderbolt begins to question Clove's loyalty to Robotnik and suspects that she's resenting his power. Rather than reveal the truth of her personal motives, Clove tries to stroke Thunderbolt's ego by saying that she and her people are rather shy about showing praise to their boss, and that they wouldn't dare try to upstage Thunderbolt's loyalty to Robotnik. This manages to work on the Chinchilla, and the two of them succeed in shutting down the defense systems. She then joins Robotnik and the other Egg Bosses to fight off the Nagas twins and the Witch Carts. In the end, they are victorious, and Robotnik convinces Wendy Nagas to join the Egg Army. Clove returns to her post in the Stone Stormland zone, where Cassia and her soldiers surprise her with a welcome home party. And in issue 285, they had a small cameo where they witnessed one of the Gaia temples being summoned by Robotnik. And that concludes the history of Clove and Cassia. Definitely some of the more tragic characters from Archie Sonic's new timeline. There seems to be this misconception with people that they think that Archie Sonic's new canon was more lighthearted and being more closer to the games, which is not entirely true. The new continuity did have its serious moments from time to time, and this was one of them. Unlike most of the egg bosses that joined Robotnik in favor of power, Clove and Cassia's inclusion was more personal reasons. In this case, they only joined in the hopes that Robotnik would cure Cassia's illness. In a lot of ways, Clove is like the new canon's version of Uncle Beauregard, aka the Baron, from the old timeline. Both of them are protective of their soldiers. They prefer to talk things out peacefully rather than use brute force. And despite working for Robotnik, they're not really villains, just victims of circumstances. Also, their designs just look great. Who knew that pronghorns would fit well in the Sonic design? Despite Clove having that glaring look most of the time, it's all just a facade, as she isn't as mean as you'd think she would be. She cares for the safety of the other pronghorn soldiers in her army, who seem more interested in just hanging around rather than doing Robotnik's dirty work, and she cares deeply for her younger sister Cassia. Speaking of which, Cassia is also a great character. While Clove is more serious, Cassia is a bit more wild and playful, which makes it even more sadder that she's been diagnosed with some unknown disease. It's also creepy that Clove's weapon of choice is a staff with an electrical blade, and makes it look more like a scythe. Oof. While you would argue that Clove should have found someone else to help find a cure for her sister, the comics mention that turning to Robotnik was out of a desperate last resort, implying that their homeland wasn't so well known on medical facilities, or they also had no idea on how to cure Cassia. The scene with Clove talking to Robotnik about Cassia is really great and emotional, and gives us the full details on why they're in this situation. Clove desperately begged Robotnik's help to cure her sister, and he agrees to help on the condition that she would serve him in his egg army. Despite the cybernetic upgrades, Clove would soon discover that all the things Robotnik had said was nothing more than empty promises. And the fact that she hides the truth from Cassia and keeping her promise that they'll be free makes it even more heart-wrenching. It's also one of my favorite moments with Dr. Robotnik in Archie Sonic's new timeline. It really shows just how cruel he can be with his actions to those begging him for help. Sadly, thanks to the comic's abrupt cancellation, Clove and Cassia didn't get much of a happy ending. So just like Matilda the Armadillo and Razor the Shark, the potential for Clove and Cassia in future stories was taken away too soon. Although the story doesn't quite end there, on the Bumblecast podcast series, Allie Baker, one of the writers on Archie Sonic who worked on most of the stories involving the Pronghorn sisters, would sometimes pop up here and there. In episode 101, she revealed a handful of story ideas that were planned out for Clove and Cassia before the comic's cancellation. One idea would have explored more about their origins before joining Robotnik. Their mother Piper had died of an illness, and their father Sage would leave to find a cure when Cassia became ill, but never returned, leaving the two sisters to fend for themselves. Other ideas would have focused on Cassia finding out about the truth that the cybernetics haven't cured her of the disease, so she bitterly leaves Clove and the Egg Army. She would come across either the Freedom Fighters or Gunn, who would take Cassia in and find a way to cure her condition. Clove, on the other hand, believes that her sister died in the wilderness, and would have fallen into a deep depression, as well as becoming more cold and bitter, thinking that all she could do now was serve Robotnik. But eventually she would learn that Cassia is alive and well, so at least there's sort of a happy ending for what was planned out. I think it would be neat to see Cassia be taken in by the Freedom Fighters, especially with how she encountered Bunny Rabbit. Enemies at first, then calling a truce for a while, then they'd probably become close friends now that they have time to understand each other better. A real shame that none of these ideas happened. Hell, I would have paid money to see these two get their own spin-off story in the Sonic Universe comics, but alas. Well, that wraps up this character file, so until then, I got a juice!